The Defender 110 is definitely a car for people who love cars and for people who love adventure. And if you're the sort of person who loves cars, chances are you're going to love the Defender. Like my wife is very much a car person. She gets all the magazines, watches all the shows. She has had a Defender in one form or other since she was 18 years old. And now, she won't like me saying this, almost 40 years later, we still have a Defender. So look, the Defender 110, vehicle built for the modern explorer, expedition ready, good for cities, good for outside the cities. My kids learn how to drive a car on a Defender in the desert in Kuwait because, again, Defender is great for the city, great for the highway driving, great for any kind of regular driving, but great for off-roading too, which made the desert a perfect place to teach them. So the Defender is a vehicle built for extremes. It has a lot of endurance, but it looks great. And the Defender 110 has 5 seats with the option of 7, good for a big family. Also has 3D surround cameras with clear sight ground view, clear sight rear view, so you have an unobstructed rear view, even when there are things blocking your rear view. Next generation Pivi Pro infotainment system, good for the kids. And intuitive driver displays that are good for the drivers. Explore the Defender 110 at LandRoverUSA.com. So the question is, I really feel in order to get not good at something, but great at something, you have to be obsessed. You can't just be obsessed about anything. I can't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be obsessed about learning languages today, or I'm going to be obsessed at math or investing or whatever today. You have to be legitimately deep down obsessed. And I think obsession has good connotations and bad connotations. Like, obsession is like addiction. Like you have to want something more than you want just about anything else in life. And that kind of reminds me of the definitions of addiction. And so you have to have a little bit of craziness to be obsessed, a little bit of something almost wrong with you. So there's a couple questions. One is, can you nurture that obsession in yourself and do it in a healthy way? And I'm not so sure. Like whenever I've gotten obsessed with something, it's hurt other areas of my life. It removes the balance from your life. And at the same time, there's so much joy when you start getting better at something you're obsessed with, or you start entering the subculture of something you're obsessed with. And, I've seen this just in the past few weeks in my traveling. I went to Norway. I was commentating for TV for probably the best chess tournament in world history. I mean, the top 6 players in the world were playing in it. And then I went to a crypto conference in Paris where people were obsessed about various crypto tokens, particularly Tau, which is like the AI crypto token. And I saw that obsession to the point where I couldn't even really, for some people, they were so deep into it, it was even hard to understand what they were saying because their dives have been so deep. But I appreciated their obsession and learned whatever I could. But I also find that, sometimes obsession is it's related to the addiction to dopamine, the dopamine that you get when you succeed or at whatever it is you're obsessed at, or when you get further and further up in whatever subculture it is. But not only is it related to the dopamine, but one thing you have to realize about, and this is the important thing, if you're doing something competitive, whether it's investing or a game or a sport or sometimes in business, you always have to realize that the person who's obsessed is probably going to beat the person who is not obsessed. Now, that might not always be true because there might be so much emotional overload that comes with obsession that you can't quite deal with the volatility of what happens to you when you're obsessed with something. And by volatility, I mean sometimes you're not as good as you would like, so you get angry at yourself, or sometimes you're too good, so there's ego associated with that. But in any case, when I was in Norway, I sat down with Dirk Jan ten Geuzendam. I've known Dirk for years. I don't even know how to say his name properly. And he is the editor at New in Chess. This was a magazine that I was a fan of 30 years ago when I was growing. I was such a fan of this magazine. And I sat down with him for his podcast. And we didn't just talk about chess. Far from it. We actually talked a lot about obsession and kind of the ups and downs I've had in my life that have often drawn me back into these weird subcultures that have taken care of me. And then more recently, how it is to fail at something you're obsessed with because, as I'm older, the challenges of learning become greater. And we discuss that and how to deal with them and what is your role as an older person in the subculture that you love. But we also talk about just learning in general. And I think that's very valuable for everyone. So whether it's obsession or learning or adult learning, or even just chess that you're interested in, then this is the podcast for you where we're replaying that podcast. I highly encourage you to check out New in Chess's podcast. If you're even remotely interested in chess, it's one of the best chess podcasts out there, if not the best. And New in Chess magazine for 30 years or more has been my favorite magazine about chess. So it's such a pleasure for me to sit down with Dirk when we were out there in Norway. What an amazing experience, and I hope you love this episode as much as I did making it.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the New in Chess podcast. In the New in Chess podcast, we talk to leading grandmasters, authors, trainers, and other personalities from the fascinating world of chess. The New in Chess podcast is brought to you by DGT, the chess innovators. DGT is the only brand that provides everything a chess event needs to broadcast its games, from chess clocks to sensory chessboards. My name is Dirk Jan ten Geuzendam. This week's episode of the New in Chess podcast features an interview with James Altucher, an ardent chess lover and one of the most inquisitive and inspiring persons I've met in recent years. James Altucher is an investor, a venture capitalist, and a firm believer in AI and crypto. He's also a best-selling author. You may know his book, Choose Yourself, and he has a popular podcast with 50,000 subscribers, The James Altucher Show, where he dives into the world of entrepreneurship, personal development, and out-of-the-box thinking. Or, as he puts it, he interviews the world's peak performers in every area of life. And he has a great column in New in Chess magazine in which he describes his struggle to regain his old chess strength after he returned to his favorite game following let's call it a sabbatical of more than 20 years. I'd been looking forward to recording a podcast with James about his passion for chess for a long time, and that's what we did last week in Stavanger in Norway. So here it is, my interview with James Altucher. Well, hello, James. I'm delighted that you accepted the invitation to join the podcast.
Finally on the New in Chess podcast. This is the definition of imposter syndrome, me on the New in Chess podcast.
No. Let me tell you why I'm so happy that you're on the New in Chess podcast. I'll give the listeners some background why I'm delighted. So you're a best-selling author of books on business, investments, related areas, an entrepreneur, an angel investor. You have a highly popular podcast, The James Altucher Show, where you talk to leading figures in science, politics, economics, and whatnot.
And even chess.
And
Kasparov, Judit, Polgar. They've been on my podcast.
Yeah, we'll come to that because, and much to my delight, you have a column in New in Chess magazine where you write about your passion for chess and your attempt to regain your chess strength from some 20 years ago. We've known each other for a couple of years. We sometimes talk on Zoom about the column and about chess and life in general. And we've met at some prestigious chess events. And now we are here in Stavanger, Norway, where you were the moderator of the Norway Summit, a knowledge-sharing conference, and where you're a guest at Norway Chess, one of the finest chess tournaments in the world. The way I've gotten to know you is, what I'm always struck by is your permanent enthusiasm for knowledge, broadening your views. Probably one of the most inquisitive persons I've met in recent years. You're permanently asking questions. Where does that come from?
I think I have a fear that if I don't seek out information, then I'm going to be just left behind. The there's so many interesting things in the world. And if you even blink for a second, you miss them. And so, for instance, right now, there's a lot of talk about AI. There's a lot of talk about new technologies, new things happening in the world. If you stop learning and you stop listening and you stop looking at all these amazing new innovations around you, I'm afraid death results. Like the thirst for knowledge or the quest for knowledge is life, and it gives so much pleasure that it becomes like an addiction. Like with chess, chess is kind of a safe way to experiment with life because it's the same thing. There's so much knowledge out there, and no one can be perfect at chess. No one can have as much knowledge as there is in chess. And so it becomes addictive, this quest for knowledge in chess, just like it is with life. And so it's these things I get obsessed by.
Yeah. Well, let's say in line with your character, well, you must have been a real chess fanatic when you started to play.
Yeah, and I'm afraid I started late. Like, I wish I had started earlier. I basically started at the age of 17. And as we know, chess strength is kind of correlated with how young you are when you start. But I would say once I started playing, there was never a day I didn't spend probably 6 to 10 hours a day studying chess. As a kid, I would skip school. And if I lost a game in a tournament, I couldn't go to school for at least 2 days. I would be so upset that I would have to just learn, like, what was I doing wrong? And I did get better. I ultimately got up to 2,200 in my 20s, but it was definitely a lot of work for me. But it was so much pleasure too.
What was it that got you started? I mean, you say you were 17 when you started to play. Why?
I think I didn't have a girlfriend and I didn't think I was, useful for anything or wanted for anything. And suddenly my high school chess team needed an extra player and asked me, and I won that first game, and everybody was happy that I won. And I'm like, oh, this is a good way to get positive recognition. Just a year later, I was New Jersey's junior champion because I felt like every notch higher would be more and more recognition of me. So it was kind of an ego thing, except for the fact that I then became just addicted to it. I just loved it so much. I mean, there's so much beauty in the game. And at the time that I was learning, many years ago, Kharkov and Kasparov were right in the middle of their match with the drama of that, the 40 or so draws. It was sort of like Soviet Union versus the new way of thinking. So chess always has this bigger picture involved in its stories, or at least this mythical bigger picture, whether it's real or not.
But were there enough people around you who shared that interest? Or
yeah, my father, when he was younger, he played chess, and he never pushed me on playing chess, which is why I was much older when I started. But once I started playing, and I guess it's an important thing, but it was also recognition from him. Every night he could come home and I could say, let's play a game of chess. And of course, for many months after I started, he would be able to beat me. And then it was like any young man observes, eventually it is so great to defeat your father ultimately.
yeah.
And then, when many years later, he actually got re-addicted to chess. And I saw after he passed away, I logged into his ICC account and I was just cleaning up his computer. And I saw how he played over 20,000 games. And I remember thinking that was sad that that's how he spent his later years, playing 20,000 games of chess. Although I could say probably in the past 2 or 3 years, I've played 20,000 games of chess. So now I understand it a little bit more.
So how all-consuming was it at the time for you? I mean, you were going to school.
Yeah, but I would skip the maximum days of school. It was all-consuming. I mean, when it was so interesting because I always wanted to do anything I could to try to be the best. So I was taking lots of lessons. I've had many grandmaster coaches. But I will say, like at the time, my favorite coach at that moment was Reshevsky. So it was at the tail end of his life. One of the most famous prodigies in chess history. Like there's this famous photo when he's a kid playing the cymbal against all the older men. Yeah. But that was always me too, is that if I did something, I wanted to kind of, touch the hem of the greats to really experience the full culture and the game.
How was Reshevsky? Because when he was older, he used a bit of a nuisance at the board.
Yeah, he was a bit gruff. And I remember my dad also played chess. He wanted to watch the lesson. And Reshevsky was like, no, and just shut the door in his face. And then what was interesting, we played a game and he kept asking me questions about the position. But his main thing was calculation. He was like, okay, what are you saying? What are you looking at? And then he's like, okay, go and move deeper. Go and move deeper, move deeper. He was always pushing to go a move deeper. And I remember one time though, I played one game with him and then showed it to a friend of mine who was an IM. And my friend pointed out, Gruszewski moved the pieces in the game. It looks like he moved the pieces because why is this piece suddenly here? Because I'd written everything down, but then suddenly he moved a piece that shouldn't have been where it was. So who knows?
Yeah. So while you spend a lot of time on chess, what thoughts did you have about chess? I mean, was it playing a role in your thoughts about the future? Or, I mean, were you considering or hoping for a professional career, or was it just a passion?
I don't know. I saw that there were advantages in life. Like I don't think I ever really thought, okay, I could be a professional player because that requires, an extra level of excellence. Although, of course, I never had any doubts that I could achieve anything I wanted. Although later as an adult, you learn you can't achieve anything you want. But I always saw that it opened doors for me. So at the time I was playing, I was also looking at applying to college. And I realized, this is something that makes me different. And, colleges notice things like that. Chess has this cultural mystique, whether it's true or not, is associated with intelligence and culture. You watch almost any television show now, at some point in the show, there will be a chessboard in the background. Like if you're watching Sherlock Holmes, there's a chessboard in the background. If you're watching a show about doctors, the big doctor who always solves every problem is a chessboard in the background. So it's almost in every TV show, someone has a chessboard. And I saw it really throughout my life ever since. Even to this day, chess opens doors in unusual ways that you wouldn't expect. But you have to kind of press on that and know that. But, I think when we're in the chess world, we see the hierarchy of the chess world where if you're a GM, you think you're no good unless you're top 10. If you're top 10, you think you're no good unless you're the number one. If you're an IM, you want to be a GM. If you're an FM or NM, you want to be an IM. But the reality is, if you're decent at chess, you're better than 99.999% of all. There's 600 million chess players in the world, and there's 1,000 GMs or whatever. So it's relatively easy to be so good that everyone thinks you're practically the world champion. Like when I told people I was coming to this Norway chess, and I described it, I said it was the strongest chess tournament in history. My friends who don't know anything about chess would say, "Oh, are you playing in it?" Even though there would be no reason for them to think that. But they just think if you're a master of chess, that means you must be the best.
So then there came a moment when chess took a backseat.
Yeah.
And you didn't play for many years.
Yeah.
How did that, just other interests took over, or what happened?
Yeah, I had a really good run. I won the under 2200 section on the World Open, which gave me enough money to get a new apartment. And I was going to keep going. Maybe I hit 2200, maybe I'll hit 2300. I was walking with a business partner of mine, and for some reason I thought he would be interested in this nuance of endgames that I just encountered. He kind of yelled at me. He's like, "James, you're running a business. Why are you playing this kid's game when we need to make money?" And I don't know, that kind of hit me hard. Like my wife was about to have a baby, and he was right. And again, it's related to this point where, what was really my goal? Because again, nobody could tell a difference between FM and IM or NM and IM. It doesn't matter, but it takes another 7 years of hard work to get to that level. And so I decided, okay, I need to focus on business. And then I stopped. I just stopped cold. And I didn't look at it again for another 27 years. So, yeah, and I'll say there was one other experience. You could see when age starts to take an effect. At this point, I was around, I was 29. I was in my 20s somewhere. And I remember I was played in the Manhattan Chess Club at a tournament. And I played the 13-year-old Irena Krush. And she even had the name Krush. And I had been having a good run, undefeated for quite some time. And then she totally crushed me. And then afterwards, she's explaining, maybe on move 9, your bishop b5 was not so good. And I figure I can't, how am I ever, that's the end of my competitive ability, because she's going to keep getting better and better. And I have to raise a family now. So what am I going to do? And I'm still dealing with this. The notion of a plateau is very hard to deal with. It feels good to always improve. Mm-hmm. Even when you lose a game, if you're in general improving. But to plateau and try to find other ways to be happy with something you love so much is a challenge in life. And we see this in all aspects of life. Let's take, marriage as an example, marriage transforms, right? At first there's the passion and the lust for it, but then you have to kind of realize this is not just that, but it's also, if to make a marriage last for consistently for many years, it has to be a higher form of companionship. And with chess, it couldn't quite be a companion of chess. I had to love it.
Yeah, and lust for it.
Take a quick break. If you like this episode, I'd really, really appreciate it. It would mean so much to me. Please share it with your friends and subscribe to the podcast. Email me at altucher@gmail.com and tell me why you subscribed. Thanks. I think if you love cars, you love the Defender. We have a Defender, and my wife, she's had a Defender in one version or other since she was 18 years old, since she started driving. And our kids even learn how to drive on a Defender. They learn how to drive on the desert in Kuwait because not only is Defender, of course, great highway driving, but you could drive it. It's great for off-roading. You could drive it on the desert. And that was the place where my kids learned how to drive a car. That's why the Defender is the vehicle that's basically adapted for the city, but also for beyond. The Defender 90 is the original two-door Defender body design. It's a smaller silhouette, but fits for journeys of all size. There's 3D surround cameras with clear sight ground view, so it lets you see underneath the vehicle and anticipate obstacles and rough terrain. Again, for the urban city and beyond. There's a next-gen Pivi Pro infotainment system, which of course is great for 3 kids driving in the back seat, and intuitive driver displays that are customizable to your journey. Explore the Defender 90 at LandRoverUSA.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command. Like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction. Narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Well, unfortunately, you had the same passion for business, for creating businesses. It's a rich career that you've had with many ups and downs. You've written about that extensively and talked about that extensively. People often say that knowledge of chess has merits in other fields. Did you have those connections in your mind that you thought, okay, I may have given up chess, but here I'm going to make a clever chess move?
Not then, but now I see it. So then I think the same things that made me passionate about it, whether it was business or writing and maybe good at those things, also made me good at chess, or good, again, relative to others. And I didn't think chess helped me. I thought just the way I was helped my chess. But now I actually see ways in which chess helps me. When you're playing a chess game, and it's not about seeing moves ahead, it's not about calculating things, but there's one aspect of chess that I realize I've now improved areas of my life because of this, which is that when you're in a chess position, let's say you're mildly down. Let's say you're playing black, white's got a mild advantage. You think in terms of problems. So like you think, oh, it's the French defense. My white squared bishop is weak. I now need to spend a few moves figuring out how to efficiently get my white squared bishop active. So that's a problem. And I realized when I solve that problem, if I can solve it without damaging other parts of my position, I'll have a better game than I had before. And it's the same thing now that, like, business, for instance, is a set of problems. So let's say you have a business that has one major customer that can make or break you. If that customer drops you, you're dead. Okay, so this is a problem. So now I need to focus on finding other customers, and then my business will be better. And you realize you could break down lots of situations into what are the problems that are right in front of me right now, not in the distant future, but right in front of me right now. And how do I solve these problems? Because once I do, my situation will at least be better for the moment. And I've noticed lately, that's the biggest thing that I've been learning in chess, is that it's really more, it's not about these long-term plans and calculating 16 moves. Very few games are won because of a long-term plan that works out or because of the 16-move tactic. They're won because you solve these little problems while your opponent maybe is forgetting to solve his problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned some of your successes as a chess player. What do you see as your biggest achievements as an entrepreneur or an investor or a businessman?
Yeah, I think just on a personal level, I think solving problems that other people had that where I enjoyed the problem solving. So whenever I've tried to start, I've had many more business failures and successes. And I realized whenever I was trying to do a business that I didn't love what I was doing. Like sometimes you do a business just because you think, oh, I'm going to make a lot of money doing this. Whenever you have that view, at least for me, it never works. So, my very first business that I started, which was in the 90s, I was making websites for entertainment companies. So music labels, movie studios, I was making their websites. Nobody was making websites then. This was the 90s. People barely knew the web existed. And so I was making these websites, solving their big problems because every company at that point needed a website and didn't have one. And I enjoyed the creativity of it and the innovation of it, and it was cutting edge. And any business that I started, I always felt like if I'm adding value in an area that I love, so I enjoy doing it, then it's going to work. Like one time I made a site, it was like a dating website, and I didn't have any interest in it. And of course, it failed instantly. Or another time I started a company simply because I had an idea and everybody wrote a check to fund the business, but I was not interested at all. I thought I'm going to just make instant money, and it immediately failed. And this is true for chess too. Like if you're not obsessed, you're not going to get better, because the person who is obsessed, you're competing against millions of people who are obsessed. They're going to beat you. There's no talent that's going to beat obsession. And it's the same thing in business. The demand for money is so great that you're only competing with people who are obsessed. So if you're not as obsessed as they are, you're going to lose.
You've also written about that. I mean, you're writing a chess column where you're talking about your experiences. You've written successful books. Is it something that came automatically to translate your thoughts into books?
Yeah. So earlier in the early 90s, I was in graduate school for computer science at a great school in the US, Carnegie Mellon University, and I got thrown out. And the reason I got thrown out was because suddenly I wanted to be a writer. And so I would write all day long. I was, again, obsessed. And I was not good because it takes many years. Like now everybody can write on the computer and on the web and post on LinkedIn and they're a writer. But it's very hard to be a good writer and to communicate well.
But that was writing novels or?
Yeah, I was trying to write the great American novel like every young kid. And so I was just writing all day long. And I was working on chess computers in grad school. So it was fun, but I loved the writing more at that time. Even though it was all bad, there's that optimism of youth where you think everything you do is good and you're talented. I mean, I was definitely fooling myself, but I wrote 4 horrible novels, dozens of short stories, but I built the skill. So later on, when, maybe there were ebbs and flows in my career and I would get back to writing, I was obsessed again and I started writing book after book. There was a period, 20 years in a row, I wrote 1 to 2 books a year. But one thing I realized the most is, and this reminds me of one thing in chess, vulnerability was the currency of writing. Like when you talk about things that nobody wants to hear about somebody who was the greatest basketball player in the world and then is, the greatest at whatever else they do in the world. People want to hear about problems. And I realized I wanted to write about, I wanted to write about going broke. After I sold my first business, I went broke and was depressed and suicidal and struggling with it. And I didn't think I could ever bounce back. And I had 2 babies to raise. And it was a very shameful period of my life. And then later, when I wrote about it, I realized my audience was 10 times more interested in that than anything about financial stuff or whatever. So I realized vulnerability is definitely the currency of success in writing. And I remember reading about Capablanca. He wrote, I forget which book he wrote about that, or maybe it was My Chess Career or Chess Fundamentals. Every game in the book was something he won. Then he wrote another book to write about his losses. Everyone criticized, you didn't write about your losses.
Yeah.
And it's very important to realize there's no shame in being relatable. Everybody has loss. Everybody suffers. And they don't want to see that you suffer because they take joy in it. They want to see that you suffer because they want to know how you got out of that. And they want to see that Capablanca, for instance, he lost games too, but then this is how he got better, because everybody loses games and they want to know how to get better. Everybody has some point where they're having money problems or health problems or career problems, and they want to know how to get out of that, because it seems like you can't when you're in the middle of it. And just knowing if someone could write, persuasively and in a storytelling way that this is how I got out of it, then people relate and they appreciate that. Once again, just like in business, you've delivered value and that pays off. So that then writing had new life for me, and I spent many years writing in that style until once again I succumbed to the addiction of chess.
Yeah, but let's say you're writing about failures and about misery, but there is a lesson to be learned at the end. I mean, there's light at the end of the tunnel, always.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. Sometimes, the scary thing is sometimes there isn't, right? Because eventually we die. So part of going for success is that it's not guaranteed. Like a lot of people think there's something now that I call failure porn, where people write about failures and then it almost becomes too obvious that at the end of their failure, they're going to be successful. Yeah. And that's what they're really writing about, is not their failure, but they want to brag about their eventual success. And the thing about failure, there's always the risk that you can't come back, and you have to deal with that. There's still no reason to be unhappy, because this happens to everyone. You still have to find ways to have well-being in your life and relationships and health as much as you can, and make the best of the hand that is dealt you. And I never knew every time I failed that I was going to, because it happened more than once where I went broke. I was just as successful at making money as I was at losing money. So I went broke many times. And yes, it gave me more confidence that I could bounce back, but it was very difficult each time. Acknowledging that and writing about that also was important for me. It's difficult to bounce. It's not impossible, and here's how I did it, but it's difficult, and people have to respect that.
Yeah. What is clear from your writing is that you love writing.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, you can see that. So you wouldn't call your books self-help books?
No.
What would you call them?
I would call them more like narrative nonfiction. Literary nonfiction sounds too ego, but narrative nonfictions where I'm just telling my story. And if other people get benefit from it, then it ends up in the self-help section. And I leaned into that a little with some of my books. I wrote a book called The Power of No, which learning how to say no, which is very hard for me, improved my life. And that was a natural fit for the self-help section. But in general, I think my books are, particularly those that when I started writing those kind of books, they were hard to categorize. So I would write many stories, and then sometimes I would distill them into lessons, but often the story themselves were the lesson. And I would say I became, again, and I forgot who said it, maybe even it was Magnus, but someone asked, what is talent? There is no innate brain thing that makes people very different, but obsession, the ability to obsess on something, I think, is what creates talent. Because I would say with writing, I became more obsessed with that than I was with chess. When I was really moving up in writing, I probably read at least a book a day, and then I would try writing in the style of the author. Then I would go to the library, I'd read the literary criticisms of that book, so I would see what other people thought of that writer in that book. And I would just do this every day for years, in addition to writing about 2,000-3,000 words a day as like a discipline. You don't have to do that forever, but there has to be some period of obsession. People then say, well, I don't really feel obsessed about anything. How do I find what it is that I could be passionate about enough that I'm obsessed? And then I think also you have to read a lot and expose yourself to a lot to know what you're going to be obsessed with. So for instance, a lot of people love stand-up comedy. They love watching stand-up comedy, and they always tell themselves, boy, it would be great if one day I can do stand-up comedy. But they never do it because it's a very scary thing. As scary as it is to do public speaking, it's 100 times scarier to do stand-up comedy, where it's a room full of drunk tourists and you have to somehow viscerally make them laugh, even though you have no idea about them, they have no idea about you. It's very scary. But I did that once, and then I became obsessed. Like, it touched something in me that, I have to have that feeling again. And, like an addiction. And, that was another thing, for about 6 years, every night, sometimes twice a night, I would do stand-up comedy. And then again, I completely stopped it. Well, the pandemic happened and then chess happened.
Yeah.
And then I rationalized chess like, I'm going to write a book about the experience of taking a 27-year break and being older and now getting good at chess again. I'm going to write a whole book about it. I realize now it was just rationalization. Who knows if I ever write that book?
Yeah. Of course, not everyone has to be obsessed about something. It's what we see in the chess world. I mean, there's some people who are obsessed, others, they just love the game. Yeah. Is happy to play a game. But as you said, after 27 years of abstention, you returned to chess. Well, what sparked that return?
Honestly, it was probably the Queen's Gambit. And I saw the reverence everybody had. Like, that was such a great show. Do you know any chess players? And I'm thinking, I'm a chess player. And then I started playing a little bit of chess again. And I was playing on ICC, which was back in like 1992, 1993. That was a place on the internet that I had helped start. It came out of Carnegie Mellon. Professor I knew wrote the code. I was one of the first administrators. I wrote some of the code for ICC. And so I started playing on ICC and I was losing. And I'm like, I don't understand. How could I be losing to people of this rating? I'm, 100 points, 200 points higher. What's going on? And I figured, okay, maybe openings have changed a little bit. So I just need to refresh my openings. So and by the way, at this point, so Gary Kasparov had been on my podcast several times, and we would occasionally talk on Zoom or the phone or whatever. And he was like, why are you using ICC? And I'm like, well, what else is there? That's the only place to play chess online. Yeah. He's like, no, use Chess or chess.com. And so I started using those, and I was like, oh yeah, this is...
So now we're talking 3 years ago? Or
yeah, more like 2020, 2021, right after the Queen's Gambit show. And I started playing on Chess, and I could not believe I was losing as much as I was. I'm like, what is going on? Yeah. And I remember my wife got so upset at me. One time, we're going to a party, and she says, we got to go. And I was playing, you go first. I'm just going to play a little more. Because I can't stop on a 20-game losing streak. Yeah. I just never showed up at that party. She came back hours later, just so upset at me. Then I figured, okay, well, I need to replicate what I did when I was younger, which is I'm going to get a coach, I'm going to watch videos, I'm going to read books, and I'm going to take it seriously again. I had just written a book called Skip the Line, and part of the book was about learning things quickly. And I said, I'm going to use the techniques that I wrote about to learn things quickly to just get back to my old strength in chess. And so I did all this. I did all the techniques that I had written about and that I said I was going to do. It's just been a journey. I remember I was watching Eric Rosen's videos. He was the first streamer I was watching. And he has such a great style as a YouTuber and a streamer. And I wrote him, and he wrote back and said, sure, I'll give you lessons. And, I wanted to learn the Stafford Gambit. It seemed like the perfect way to win every game. Yeah. And I realized that. So I started taking lessons with him. And a very nice guy, very generous person. And I realized several things all of a sudden about my brain. I could not remember anything he was showing me. Like, because he would show me the Stafford Gambit, and I would play a game. I would immediately forget all the moves. I wouldn't remember any of the moves. And then just on calculating, it always looks so easy. He's calculating and the mate in 7 on the Stafford Gambit. And I used to be pretty good at calculating when I was 17, 18 years old. I remember I was making all these blunders, and blunders are normal, but I was making more than I thought I should make. And so I started thinking, what changes in the brain as you age? And I realized a lot of things change. And just to continue that story, I started jumping from chess coach to chess coach. But you were also consulting scientists in the field. Yeah, I mean, I was definitely involved in the discussion about education and learning, and I was talking to lots of neuroscientists about what happens. I mean, the benefit is I have this podcast. So anything I wanted to learn, I would just call the best in the world at that field.
Yeah.
And I've had on in my podcast, whether it's Gary Kasparov or, in America, there's basketball is the favorite sport. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the best basketball player in history. I would have him on. I would have on the best entrepreneurs, Richard Branson, Mark Cuban. I would have, everybody, every field I'd have the best writers on, amazing writers. And so I would have neuroscientists on like Andrew Huberman, what changes in the brain as you get older? A lot of things change. Just very simply, your power to calculate does go down. The neurons, they just get tired. They slow down. They're already operating very fast, but even just a slight slowdown puts you at a disadvantage to younger people. And your memory also goes down, in part because, of course, you have many more responsibilities, many more things kind of taking up the real estate in your brain. But also, when you're younger, if you're passionate about something or obsessed about something, the connection between those neurons that you're memorizing or that are being used for memories in the areas that you're obsessed with, they form these sheaths around them so that the connection stays very strong and fast. And that sheath starts to weaken, and your ability to form those new sheaths that made out of this material called myelin, that weakens, and you just become less capable of remembering. And I can still remember things from when I was a kid, even games from when I was a kid, because those still have that almost cement-like sheaths around them. But now, I played a game last night at this tournament. We were all sitting around playing chess. I can't even remember the game. I wanted to remember it. I sacked the queen against the grandmaster. I was doing well, but can't remember the game.
Yeah, so now you know why that is. So what do you do to solve that? Because you still have that ambition to go back to that rating of 27 years ago.
Right. So that goes down. So what goes up? There is something that age gives, which is your pattern recognition, believe it or not, goes up. People call it wisdom. Like, oh, I've been in this situation before. This is how you handle these situations. I've seen other people in this situation. This is how you handle these situations. Oh, this person is not treating me well. Well, now I know from wisdom and many years of experience, spend less time with that person as opposed to trying to please that person, which is maybe when I was younger, I would try to do. In business, there's 1,000 examples where wisdom helps you benefit. Like, oh, I see these two partners having a minor argument that you would not even think about, but this tells me not to invest. Because if they're arguing in front of a potential investor, what happens behind the scenes? But this you learn from wisdom and from experience. And so in chess, you gain that too. Now I'm making a guess, but it tends to be that players with more positional ability and a more intuitive style of play tend to survive longer than the ones that are brutal attackers and tacticians and never really learn that positional style. Like you think about someone like Ta. Ta was, of course, the best attacker, most brilliant tactician, but what gave him survivability into his 40s and 50s was he was Karpov's second for a long time in the 70s, and that gave him that positional ability all of a sudden. So he suddenly had a new life. Like if you look at his later games, they're not as tactical. They're more Karpov-like. Yeah. And that's what gave him his strength into later years. So, but the question is what you lose as good as what you gain in terms of intuition and positional knowledge and so on. And it's a very hard question to answer. I think the answer used to be maybe, which is why Smyslov in 1982 or 81 could play in the candidates matches, or Korchnoi into his 60s could play at a very high level. But now there's so much knowledge that younger people have because of computers, and there's so many more ways to train calculation and tactics and so on. I don't think the wisdom is enough to counter what you gain in other kinds of knowledge is enough to counteract what you lose in that raw chess power. By the way, an interesting statistic. What's the peak age for a mathematician? What would you say?
23?
Yeah, it's like 23 to, I think, 25 technically. And how they measure that is, I guess, based on when they write their peak paper that gets the most references. What do you think is the average age for a historian, or the peak age for a historian, where they do their best work?
58.
69.
69.
So, and it's similar for writing and similar for the arts and writing disciplines, because that requires, a historian says, oh, this event's happening now might be like these events in World War I or the decline of Rome. They're able to connect the dots more on the many, many millions of things they've learned. So I think in order to regain strength when you're older, you have to really study a lot more positional. You still have to maintain and study constantly your calculation because you lose it so fast. And then rather than understanding, it definitely is an argument for you can't memorize lines in openings, but you really have to understand at a deep, deep level the positional ideas and the openings you play. And that's the only way I've been able to survive at all. But it takes a lot more work, actually. So have you ever seen a chess player take a break and get back to where they were?
The rare exceptions of professional players leaving and then coming back, like Matthew Sadler.
The only one I was thinking was Matthew Sadler.
Yeah.
That's the only one I could think of.
But I also consider him some kind of a miracle. It's the same as in the old days when people were talking about Korchnoi and young players when they got into their 30s. They would say, yeah, well, okay, things are not going really well now, but you see Viktor Korchnoi. And I thought, dream on, because Viktor is one of a kind. It's rare.
And Sadler, if you look at him, his style of learning, you can see. So he's written many books since coming back into play. He stopped for about 10, 15 years. I forget the number. But he then read his book recently on the Queen's Gambit Declined. So you can see, for him to come back, he had to dive so deeply into the openings he plays. He could write a book on it, talking about every single idea. And then, of course, his famous book on computers, or his two famous books on computers, Game Changers being one of them. He studied the positional styles of the computers and then broke them down chapter by chapter. So that gave him an extra edge, that he was studying state-of-the-art positional knowledge. I mean, the kind of positional knowledge that Magnus also has studied to stay at the top. And he was studying this before everyone else studied them, the positional styles of Alpha Zero. So that gave him an edge, like accumulating wisdom that no one had yet had. So I think that helped him too. He's a miracle, but his style of learning and his curiosity helps him as well. And again, I can't think of anyone else at that level who came back to, basically back to where he was.
Yeah. What I find fascinating is that, let's say, chess has been used as a model for improvements in computer science. And I mean, let's try it with chess first, and then we go on to the other things. The way you're writing about how to get back your old rating feels like a study in cognitive decline or prodigies. I mean, everything that has to do with exceptional minds and the growth and the decline of the mind.
Yeah, because think that when you're young too, you lean into the things that are good. So young people, and I'm talking about people in their 20s, but now you see kids, the young people are good at tactics. They're really good at tactics and their memories are great. So they don't even know that they need to study positional stuff, because you can get to 2200, 2300 memorizing openings. Yeah, you'll know the ideas a little bit, like, okay, King's Indian, I'm going to do F5, F4, G4, checkmate. And then they have the tactics to do the mate. So then when you're older and that attack no longer works for whatever reason, you have to realize, oh, maybe I need to open the C file too. And I got to be a little careful now, because the computer has already told the kids all the checkmates that happen and they're checkmated anymore. So there's a lot more knowledge to memorize. But again, you can counterbalance it somewhat if you remind yourself that, oh, I never learned all these ideas. Like, I've learned so much more about chess since coming back than I didn't know what it meant. Oh, here's a weak white squares. I didn't care about that as a kid. Okay, I'm just gonna use tactics. I don't need to know who white squares are. So, but now you need to know tactics could be generated by exploiting, if you have the bishop pair or they don't have the white squared bishop, you could exploit that. I didn't know anything, to get 2200 back then about all that stuff. But now you really need to study things in chess that you never studied before.
Well, chess is, by many people, it's held in high esteem. They see chess players as cerebral supermen and super women. What is special about chess players? I mean, you've met the best players in the world and talked to them, asked them lots of questions. Well, what is special about them?
First off, the game playing mentality is always interesting. You see various subcultures around games like chess, poker, even backgammon. And it's an exciting thing when you meet people who play games professionally because it's such a wonderful thing. You don't have to go into an office and you see these people traveling around the world playing tournaments in Monaco or Amsterdam or all the most exotic places in the world. And you think that must be a great life. And it is probably, but they're dealing with their own frustrations. In every game and sport, there's such an extreme hierarchy where your pay is and your benefits from it are completely related to where you are in the hierarchy. And so there's a certain frustration. But I would say, in general, chess players are very curious people. They're very excited to learn about new ideas. Take someone like Vishy Anand. He has also defied, he's almost as old as I am, and he's in the top 15 in the world. And I think he's benefited from making that transformation that you have to make when you go from young to older, which is being a mentor. And you take what you learned and now you're able to transmit it to the next generation. And that's a natural role as these parts of the brain change because you have that wisdom. But I think what's helped him is that he sees the games that the younger people play and that he fuels his own play. Like he is able to maintain, because as much as he's mentoring the younger people, I am very sure he is seeing their games and they're teaching him without them realizing it, how to stay back. And they're teaching him how to stay in the top 15. So he's benefited a lot from that. But, in general, I think chess players, they're, on the one hand, at some level, there's an addictive quality to chess. There's very much an addiction-like quality to the obsession, but they're all very curious. They're very, like we see in the hotel where this chess tournament is playing, the chess players, after a full day of playing in the best chess tournament in history, some of them are playing card games with anybody in the hotel. Like they just love playing and
Alpha they are playing.
Yeah, they're playing. I didn't want to say the actual doing. I didn't want to expose anyone, but yeah, they're playing this game Avalon, which I have no clue about. And I can't understand what the attraction to that is over chess. But, they're very playful and they want to enjoy life.
Yeah. Well, as said in your podcast, the James Altucher Show, you have the most interesting people in all kinds of areas, and then in science, politics, whatever. I've discovered many great people that I had no clue about that were on your show. You also had Kasparov and Judit Polgar and Hikaru Nakamura. What did you want to know from them?
I don't know, because I think because they're heroes. Sometimes it's hardest to interview a hero. And so I was so scared when I interviewed Kasparov because I grew up on his real tenure as world champion. And
because intimidating.
Oh, I was so intimidated.
Yeah.
And I'll just mention one thing, which is that, so I got to know him through the podcast and we became friends. And then we were all, my wife and his wife, and we all became Facebook friends. And Dasha, Gary's wife, really enjoyed when I would post writing, when I would post an article or a story, something I'd written. She would always like it. She would comment. And eventually, I guess, Dasha and my wife said, okay, we all have to get together for dinner. And I said to my wife, no, there is no way I'm having dinner with Gary Kasparov. Like, it's one thing having a podcast. Like, I can't, I'm just going to be quiet the whole time. I'm going to be too intimidated. I'm not going to be able to eat my food.
Yeah.
But it was okay. We did get together, and it was partially what I said, but it was also partially we enjoyed it. And
there were some light moments as well.
Yeah, I don't know about light moments. There were a lot of Gary moments, and then and then I had fun talking to him about his different experiences and so on. But I think I wanted to learn, though, the same thing I want to learn now, which is what is the source of all this immense talent and skill. And I don't think they know the answers, because when you're so much into it, you don't necessarily know how to transmit what other people should do. Like, I remember saying to Gary, and this was not a private conversation, it was on the podcast, the very first podcast we did, I said, like, look, when you were 7 years old, you went to the Botvinnik school, you were clearly a great young player, you were a talent. You went to the Botvinnik school with other young kids. And I said, what then did separate you out so that you became the most talented and the most skilled? What extra thing did you work on that really made you the best? And he was like, no. I was always the best. So, they have a lot of confidence in themselves. And, for Judith, the thing that stands out is she said, the best training I've ever did was blindfold training. So that was interesting, like just the visualization aspect for her. And you see, even when she comments now, obviously she doesn't use a computer, and the ideas she has are so out of this world when she's commentating, and it's an inspiration to watch her comment. And, Hikaru also he learned so many ideas when he was young because his father was a chess coach and a strong chess player. And I don't know if he really knows what it would be like if he didn't have that experience. No one knows what it would be like if they didn't have the experiences they had as a kid. So sometimes that's hard to get my groove in terms of interviewing chess players. You've done it many times, and you do such fascinating interviews with chess players, but you're able to talk in a historical context, like what were you thinking in this? I should probably do more of that when I'm talking to them.
Well, I'm wondering, when you're speaking about Hikaru, is that, he's obviously a brilliant chess player, but to my mind, he's also shown that he has entrepreneurial talent. I mean, what he's been doing in the past years, I think it's exceptional for a chess player.
Yeah, and I think he took that view that, I remember, and you were with me, this was a year ago, we ran into Hikaru in the hotel restaurant, and Hikaru and I scheduled the thing, and I said, and I forget the exact comment. I said something like, could be the best in the world, or something about being the best in the world. And he said, no, never. And here's someone who at that moment was the second best player in the world, but he really almost felt down a little bit. Yes. And I think when he got into streaming, it was his way of having a full life, like, because he had spent his whole entire life trying to be number one. And, maybe for brief moments, forget about rating for a second, maybe for brief moments or periods of time, he was number one, but Magnus was always there. They grew up at the same time. Magnus was number one. He was number two. Mm-hmm. And I think to have a full life, he wanted to get rid of that need in himself. And so he switched to streaming. And of course, the streaming allowed him to relax about chess. I wouldn't say he ever really took a break. Let's say he took a couple-year break, but he roared back amazingly to number two in chess. I think he started getting distressed maybe in the late, I'm trying to remember the interview now, but maybe in the late 2019, 2018, he felt like he was no longer in the top 10 perhaps. Maybe there was a moment, I forget. But after streaming for so many years, and it gave him a new approach to chess, a new way of looking at it, a new way of explaining it to people, that it A, relieved the pressure, and B, maybe taught him something about chess. And now he's clearly number two. He's been number two now for like 2 or 3 years.
Well, yeah, but that's the chess playing. But let's say the business aspect, I think that he saw things early on that other people saw much later. Don't you think he had a talent for that?
Yeah, he definitely had an insight. I mean, at first he started streaming, he was saying, just to pass the time during the pandemic. But then he started to take it seriously, and he's very good. Like, you can see people listen to him not just because he's one of the best in the world. I'm sure many people who watch don't even know he's one of the best in the world. But you can see his ability to explain what he's doing while he's doing it. He could be playing 1-minute chess, and he's still able to explain very clearly, very lucidly what is happening in the game in such a way that, and by the way, he doesn't talk to the lowest echelon. He respects the listener. He's talking actually chess at a very high level, but just in a very clear way. At a very high level, he's not dumbing it down at all. And he's very successful at that. He's the best streamer in the world. I mean, I think he's incredibly talented at it, but talent, I now believe, is a result of obsession plus hard work. And he's developed, I would say, when I can watch his first streams to his streams now, he's 1,000 times better. So that was a skill he developed because he loved it.
So talent is obsession plus hard work.
I believe that's true, yeah.
Yeah.
But, and I've been trying for years to figure out what's in the brain that will make someone talented, and there's nothing. I talked to Anders Ericsson about this. So Anders Ericsson is the scientist who came up with the 10,000 hour rule. If you do something with 10,000 hours, you'll be the best in the world or among the best. And, that theory in itself has been disputed, perhaps correctly, and it's been really researched in the chess world. There's a lot of scientists in the chess world who have studied that. I would encourage people to read the papers of Fernand Gobet, who's a former Swiss national champion. He's an IM, but he really became a GM of chess science, and he worked with Anders Ericsson. But Ericsson believes there's no talent, no such thing as talent, and he came on my podcast. And at first I disagreed with him, but now years later, I think I agree. I think talent is that combination of being obsessed enough to do the hard work that lightens up whatever needs to happen in the brain to be great at chess or any area.
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned it several times that you're writing these columns and you're working hard on your chess. You're meeting people because you signed a book deal about that, or at least there is a publisher who wants you to write that book. You expressed some doubts if that book was ever going to appear. What are the chances?
Well, one way or the other, I will do a book. So I was talking to Robert Greene. Robert Greene wrote the book, The 48 Laws of Power. He wrote a book called Mastery, which, and in that he talks a little about chess, but he talks about mastery of all different skills. He's a great writer, great storyteller. And I was telling him when I was doing that, I was on this quest to get back to where I was when I was younger. And he's like, oh my God, you need to write this book. And he was saying this, he said, you could send me notes if you want, I'll help you. But this is a book that this journey you have to write about. And about a year later, I called him and I said, I think I failed. I think I'm never going to get back to where I was. And I said, I don't think I can write this book. And he's like, are you an idiot? Like, you've already done it. You've already been on the journey. And you're not a kid. You don't need to be, Michael Jordan never got back to where you're older. It's different. Life is different. You don't need to do that. And people don't even necessarily want to read that. They want to read the journey. Not that you had this big celebration at the end.
No.
And I'm still coming to grips with what he said, honestly. I still don't know if that's true or not, but it rings true. And I just don't know it's in the back of my brain thinking about how to do that. But it is true in a sense. Like, when I started playing chess, I'd go to tournaments, I'd play some games, I'd win or lose, and either go home happy or cry. And that was it. That was chess for me. And I had lessons. That was also chess. And I had friends. You build a subculture of people in chess. I'd go to Washington Square Park and play in the park with people. And that was part of my life. But now my experience as an adult, after years of different types of careers, my experience is totally different. Here we are at Norway Chess, the strongest chess tournament in history. And I see Magnus over there, Hikaru over there. I say hi to these chess players, my heroes. I interviewed Vishy Anand on stage the other day. I'm commentating for the TV broadcast today. Your experience as an adult also includes these other things that make life rich. To that extent, my experience now, I've far exceeded my expectations. I've had dinner with Garry Kasparov. When I was a kid, I would just cut with scissors out of the paper the latest Karpov-Kasparov game. That was my experience with Garry then, as opposed to having dinner with Magnus, as we did last year, or doing a podcast with Hikaru, or talking to Judit Polgar. What an amazing thing. And that's how enriching it is to explore something as an adult compared with doing something as a kid, particularly if you have the same obsession. So that leads me to a place like this.
Yes. Well, and I must say, you keep surprising me. One of the things that you told me was that you're going to organize a tournament. I mean, why? And what is that going to be like?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are cheaper than people realize. For instance, I just wanted to have some tournament that's called the James Altucher International. So I paid for the banquet room in a hotel. 100 tables could fit in there. You pay for a few other things, a few $1,000s. And now it's the James Altucher International happening in a few weeks. There's like 10 grandmasters playing in it, a bunch of international masters. I am, of course, playing in it. And that will be another experience. And you have to kind of like seek out experiences too. You can't just say, well, wouldn't it be nice if I did stand-up comedy? You go to a comedy club and say, hey, how can I do this? And then you do it. You wrote me a few years ago, hey, would you like, because I already had written many books, and now I was getting back into chess. So it was natural. You wrote me and said, hey, would you like to write for New in Chess? Of course I would. It was my favorite chess magazine 30 years ago. So of course I'm going to do it. And same thing when they asked me to come here. So you kind of have to lean into these experiences and seek them out a little bit. Like if you love something, seek out the highest experiences you can seek out. And they're there. There's no one else vying for them because everyone else stays home. And chess ultimately has helped so many areas of my life. I got into college because of chess. I got into graduate school because of chess. I got my first job because of chess. You know, I've raised money for businesses because of chess. There's so many ways chess has added to my life and still continues to now. So it's been such an amazing adventure. And I think that's what my friend Robert Greene was referring to when he says you already had the journey, like you could now write this book, which again, I'm still trying to agree with him because I feel like, I need to get back to my rating. But I know he's right at heart, but I just have to figure out how to connect the dots to write it.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful that that journey gave me the opportunity to meet you, James, and to have this talk today, which I enjoyed immensely. We could go on for a while, but I think you still have other work to do today. You have to sit next to Vishiana and then to commentate.
Well, what a thing.
Yeah.
We're going to comment. Vishy, Anand, and I will be sitting next to each other, commentating on the game that Magnus Carlsen will be playing. Like, at what point, and I'm telling you, I'm planning this, at some point during that time, I'm going to say, Vishy, how wrong can you be? And just to be able to say that to Vishwanathan Anand, 5-time world champion.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, he will appreciate that. He's got a great sense of humor. Yes. So thanks a lot, James. It's been a delight and a pleasure.
Great, Dirk. Thank you.
This summer, Pluto TV is exploding with thousands of free movies. Summer of Cinema is here. Feel the explosive action all summer long with movies like Gladiator, Mission Impossible, Beverly Hills Cop, Good Burger, and Transformers: Dark of the Moon. Bring the action with you and stream for free from all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Just go to Indeed.com/PODKATZ13 right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.